Good evening. You've reached the No Name Cinema Society, the film review show that dares to dig just a little bit deeper. This is episode 87, and tonight we continue our exploration of the films from the Oscar season of 50 years ago. That's 1974. And tonight's film for discussion is a documentary essay from Maestro Orson Welles called F for Fake. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Betzler, one of your hosts here for the evening. And fans will recognize that I'm in one of my NYC locations, the Astoria neighborhood of Queens. And I've got a couple panelists to discuss this film with me. I recently went to see an art show that featured our first panelist's work, though he signed all of the works as Jonathan Betzler. Ladies and gentlemen, Doug Hurley is here. For those of you listening on audio, he waved. He is here.
I waved. Hello. I was busy signing all the artwork with your name. So
also with us, ladies and gentlemen, is he played the lead in our screenplay reading of The Magnificent Ambersons, in which I pretended to be Orson Welles, fooling no one. Alexander Spears is back with us as well.
I'm also yes.
Yeah. First, before we get into things, I always like to talk about the song that we open and close the shows with. Tonight's song is called Show and Tell. It was originally recorded by Johnny Mathis, but in 1974, Al Wilson released the R&B version. It was the 15th biggest song of 1974.
I only go to the 14th biggest song.
Well, tune in next show then. Yeah, that is a good segue to the drinking slide. This is something that you, the fans, sent us, things that you drink to when we do them on the show. Obviously, Doug and Alexander are new, so they don't have anything. But for me, anytime I say all-time, diegesis, contrived, contrivance, or verisimilitude, that's when you guys do some drinking.
I feel like if you say diegesis, it's 2 drinks.
New rules. He's making new rules.
Yeah,
so my drink tonight is a IPA Voodoo Ranger IPA. As fans know, I'm an IPA guy. It's you know, it might be a little early for Doug, but Alexander, I suppose you're drinking with me.
No, I gotta work after this, so you know.
Yeah, at a bar, but still.
Yeah. You gotta
anyway,
for work.
So it's you and me, audience, doing some drinking. And so with that, I'm going to do the summary for tonight's film, F for Fake. Orson Welles takes a hands-on approach as he investigates first the famous art forger Elmyr de Hory, and then his equally dubious biographer, Clifford Irving, before eventually turning the lens on his own possible chicanery. So this is a more interesting film for us to dig into. So just a reminder, it's time for opening thoughts, and just a reminder, this is going to be like a one-sentence review kind of thing. What do you think about the film in one sentence or less? Alexander, you're first.
Interesting, if not oddly paced at times.
Doug.
How many fakes are faking how many fakes?
I don't understand that question, but we'll do.
Question mark. Yeah. Well, great.
On it.
Form equals function. Here we go.
And for me, my opening thought is F for fascinating and frustrating. And that's almost a little bit aligned, it sounds like, with what Alexander was saying. Possibly Doug. I actually have no idea what Doug was saying. So I'll start with another F word, and that's frenetic. Welles has always been something of an experimentalist, albeit often within the parameters of narrative storytelling. And almost like Fellini, he would get bolder and bolder with each passing film, as you might see in The Trial or Chimes After Midnight. Some of the juxtapositions in the film are interesting, but the net result, to me, is a jumbled up story, almost in a self-aware way and possibly purposeful way. As the film's host/narrator, he sometimes even acknowledges that they're getting ahead of themselves or off track, which is bizarre to me. Similarly, he made what I perceive to be a mistake that seems very unlike Welles. He seems to take for granted that his audience was very aware of the Clifford Irving Howard Hughes scandal. Granted, it was recent history in 1974, like us watching a documentary about COVID, perhaps. We were all there, but Welles generally was aware of posterity, but not so much here. I knew only a little bit about it from the 2006 Richard Gere movie, The Hoax, which depicts Irving's side of the events. The result is a film that feels like a puzzle with a lot of unused pieces scattered all over the table, at least to me. You can see the outline of what it's supposed to be, but it's as if it were abandoned before it was finalized. However, I wouldn't put it past Welles if that too were intentional and that perhaps it was part of the point, and that the answers we seek might never be truly knowable, which we'll get to. I do think the film is thematically successful in that it's a film I'm going to think about a lot, but there's still something unsatisfying about the experience in that I'm not sure it stands on its own. Case in point, I had to clarify some things on the internet, and I hate doing that. I do want to point out, however, that his presence as a de facto guide and tertiary character in the drama added a lot of gravitas to the proceedings, and his ability to spit verse or do a Hungarian accent are extremely impressive to me if we think of it as a performance. On the flip side, however, the presence of his Hungarian mistress feels forced and distracting, not in a good way. At best, she is untethered to the primary thrust of the film, and at worst, she acts as a possibly unnecessary red herring. It doesn't help that she's not very convincing when she's asked to do more than walk down a street in various outfits. That's my feeling about the structure, the way he chose to make this film. Alexander?
It's successful in being interesting. Even pretty early on at about 27 minutes, I was like, well, how long have I been watching this? Ultimately, it's because in order for it to keep your interest up, it really has to keep on introducing new things. And for a while, it's just, you're kind of back and forth on Elmyr and Clifford, and you're not really getting a whole lot of it. Then there's kind of just some what I would call LCD stuff, where you have, his mistress, girlfriend, whatever, walking across the stage or screen for no real reason other than to kind of give us some eye candy. He's like, well, you'll get the point of this later. Just because it's self-reverential doesn't mean that it's not sort of contrived too. You can drink for that one, GB.
I will drink for that. It usually needs to be me that says it, but it's worthwhile.
You could get in the realm of like creative nonfiction if you want to. Creative nonfiction is generally done either to protect certain parties or to make the narrative structure a little bit more cohesive. Yeah. This is anything but really cohesive.
It gets a bit jumbled and I get confused, almost like for the sake of, like, it didn't seem to make sense why he was jumping away or why he was all over the place. Like, there's scenes where he does tell a story at a bar, but it had that quality, that sort of meandering quality where it's like he gets distracted or something.
Right.
I felt like he was winking the whole time without winking. I just wanted to know more about all the situations, regardless of how the actual film, confusing, whatever quality wise, I felt it raised so many questions, at least for me personally. Was Irving, was he starting in on this fake thing? Was he inspired by
Elmyr de Hory?
Was he influenced by Elmyr? Was he thinking about it? Or is it all a coincidence? But there's just so many things about when did it happen, what actually happened. That's more, I feel like the film, to me, there's some interesting stuff, but more about the questions it raised. That's what I was like, ooh, I wanna find this out.
Like, I agree that it raises all these questions. And I think what I said is there's a lot to talk about with the film, or a lot to think about. But does the film's failure, my word failure, to thoroughly explore it more than it feels like it plants the seed instead of really doing any exploration, and that feels unsatisfying to me. Maybe I'm being unfair.
I think the one of the licenses you get when you make your own thing, and especially when you have sort of the longevity of something like Orson Welles, is you get to kind of call the shots on what you choose to answer and not answer. This whole idea of what is truth, what is art, what are these things that, we take for granted that we know what they mean, right? Like pornography, I'll know when I see it. What is it? What is it that we can actually boil down to the essence of what they are? And because you have him and he says, look, you could call me a fake in the same way you call these two guys fakes, because they made up stuff. I made up stuff. The entirety of what it means to be an artist is to take something that is not there and create it and bring it into existence. I think it's a really interesting exploration. He doesn't give any answers. He doesn't really even show his hand, and even as he doesn't show his hand, he kind of frustrates you, but kind of not contradicting himself, but kind of, oh yeah, there's the wink. I'm in on it. I get it. I know what you're thinking. Even when he's giving these dinner table speeches, he's in on it. He's making contact with the camera. He's breaking the fourth wall. We see these things. It's just a little bit here and there. It's interesting, and I think it's really successful in asking questions. I don't necessarily know that it's on him once the question has been asked, once the conversation has been started, to necessarily have the answer for it and finish it, because if he did that, then it would be very much like spoon feeding us, and I don't think that's what he's trying to do.
Is what I kept thinking is this is thematically successful, but the experience of watching it is weird and unsettling, and that's what I keep reacting to.
I felt like it was, like an amuse-bouche, like an appetizer.
That's fair.
How much of this was Orson Welles just being like, oh, cool, all right, that was fun, now I'm done with it?
I still think it needed something more about Hughes and Irving, in that it can be short, like literally just like, for those of you who were living under a rock, there was this supposed meeting that happened, and Howard Hughes denied it, and this is where we are.
Yeah, posterity aside, it's just nice to have a reminder. There's
Yeah.
plenty of things where I'm like, oh yeah, that thing. Or honestly, when it's a larger thing, whether I remember or not, just you being like, I'm talking about this specific point.
How we go about mentioning stuff in a way that doesn't insult the audience is really important. I think having some kind of big expository thing is not necessarily necessary, but there's a lot of explorations and sort of side quests. I'm specifically thinking the last one with the Picasso stuff, where it could have been trimmed and you could have made space for talking a little bit more about the Howard Hughes stuff, giving a little more context, because it does jump around a lot. Sometimes it is hard to sort of follow the timeline. Stuff is just thrown together and it's interesting, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you made a mosaic out of it,
Yeah.
I feel like we're knocking the film, and rightly so. Like, our complaints are valid. Like, I feel like we're all on board with the same thing. But I don't want to give the audience the impression that it's bad, because I think Doug and I both used the word fascinating, and I think it's worth a watch at least. Alexander, do you agree with that?
Oh yeah. I really liked it. I mean, I would say, B+.
We don't normally use ratings on the show, but your grade is similar. I might be a little bit less than you, just because the things that I hold dear, like the storytelling structure, was a problem for me. So I'd be in like the B- camp, not too far off.
This definitely has me thinking. It has us talking about it. I'm glad I watched it. I'm very fascinated about the whole history behind this. I was even trying to look it up. I was captivated by it till that whole thing at the end. Then I was just like, boop.
For every time that the interest that I had in it kind of waned, I found there was a surge of his charisma, his storytelling ability, his ability to just demonstrate with the Rudyard Kipling verse. Even at the end, when he's doing this Hungarian accent as her grandfather, I mean, it's interesting. I think he's giving it everything he has. I think one of the things you see from sort of the jump on this one is he just gives himself so much permission in everything, to explore whatever, to not explore whatever, to be himself, to break the fourth wall. And it's entertaining from that perspective.
Yeah, I do feel like Orson Welles had a lot of fun with it, and is a great storyteller. Like, you're like, oh my gosh, what a good poem.
As I start thinking about, different types of storytelling, your third person, limited versus unlimited. And obviously, like in this one, you could see like there's a choice to restrain himself to only the facts that he's known or seen. And that's interesting. It kind of feels, that kind of meandering, maundering kind of thing that we do when we tell stories and we've been drinking, or even it's late. We don't have all the facts and we're trying to put it together maybe in real time. It's really fun to kind of approach it from that perspective. And I think that might be part of, what influenced him to do it, because he probably was telling the story. He's like, you know what?
Oh yeah.
To your point, it's those that talk about limited perspective. It's maybe he was just not interested in investigative journalism. Like, that's not what this is about. So
that tracks.
and that's fine. Do you guys remember the name of the segment that we do at the end of each show?
Is it the T word?
It is the T word. Good job, Doug. The T word is where we talk about the themes of a film, and this one has a couple biggies as far as I'm concerned, more theme than the story. The reason we call it the T word is our founding member, Drunk Davey, didn't like to talk about themes, so the rest of us tiptoed around it. We called it the T word. A segment was born. Tonight's film, obvious theme within the fabric of the film, is art and the creation of art. The film is primarily about fine art, the recreation of work by famous artists and passing them off as originals. But this extends to other art forms as well, as we see through Irving's false biography that was really a novel, or Welles' own infamous radio broadcast from 1938 that masqueraded as a news report that sent the state of New Jersey into an uproar. The question is, though these things purported to be things they were not, does that make them no longer art? If a painting gives me pleasure or provokes me in some way, does it matter who really painted it? Or if I think it's a Picasso, does that make me try and appreciate it more because of the weight that name carries? How much does the preform complex influence the evaluation of art and thus the economics of art? If Elmyr de Hory really did fake all those paintings, that's a skill in and of itself. Even within our own recent history, there was controversy when author James Fry wrote a memoir that turned out to be basic fiction. People still love the book, A Million Little Pieces. Going back a little further to 1999, the Blair Witch Project was promoted as a documentary, as a publicity stunt, when it was really just a gimmicky horror movie. But audiences flocked to it anyway. And as we alluded to, even within the walls of his own documentary, Welles gleefully misleads us at a certain point, blurring that line further and calling attention to the ability of a filmmaker, narrative or documentarian, to, if not lie, shape facts and cast them in a certain light. And so the unanswerable question is what responsibility the artist has to the truth. If a piece of any kind has impact, does the context of its creation matter anymore? For example, while it's interesting to evaluate this within the Welles oeuvre, what happens if we knew nothing of him or his history? Would that affect our perception? Without his name, would the film have been reevaluated as it has in recent years? It's as if it's not only about the creation of art, but the consumption of art as well. And that brings up other potential things like intellectual property and the rights that come along with that. Doug, you're a painter.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
All kinds of thoughts. It does translate to all other art, the whole art market. You just need a dealer to be like, oh, this guy's great. And all of a sudden it's worth whatever. I see a painting and I'm like, oh gosh, I love this. It really evokes something. And I pay for it. I'm still not going to pay as much as if it was for somebody who's really well known, but even if it was the same painting. To me, any art of any form, does it have an effect on people? Does it bring up some emotion? Does it make you think? And then I was like, okay, cool. Well, then that's art. I do feel like there is that whole aspect, the fakeness of the whole art world.
You could argue that the hoax is
yeah. You think it's this.
Without context, is Elmyr de Hory like a faker, or is he taking advantage of a system that is patently false?
You just decide and ascribe value. So it's just all made up.
Part of this project, this whole review show that we're doing, looking back 50 years, is to look back at the films that the critics loved in 1974 are not necessarily, like there are some things that we still love from 1974, as you guys will see in the end, but there are films that get reevaluated or films that they ignore that we wind up loving and things like that because we don't have the same context. You know, a lot of times it was about them not liking the filmmaker as a person.
Yeah.
You know, Peter Bogdanovich himself was a victim of this to some degree because he got to marry Sybil Shepherd. He was the happiest guy on earth and he was so talented and whatever. And then they started trashing his films. And we're going to watch Daisy Miller later this year, part of the 1974 in review. And that was the first big flop for him, in which he cast his lover in a major role as well. It seems to be going around. But Sybil, she was a nobody. You know, Scorsese used her as well. But I do think the idea that the art world or the digestion of art is potentially just as false as, and these guys are taking advantage of that. Like, what if you saw your painting in a different gallery? Like now being the flip side, devil's advocate. What if you saw your painting in a gallery signed by someone else? Like, how would you feel about that?
I mean, somewhat flattered. I would just have a lot of questions.
A big part of what Orson Welles is getting at is just because I put my name on it as this is me, Orson Welles, doesn't mean I'm not playing Orson Welles. We're not reading legal transcripts. We're watching a guy tell a story. If you feel duped, it's a better question to ask why you feel duped. Does it really matter? If you were in Jersey and you freaked out when Orson Welles did his thing and then you found out it wasn't that big of a deal, do you feel duped, or you're like, oh, well, and probably there's some kind of ego thing attached to that. When we talk about truth, you know, there's the essence of truth and then there's the facts. As with stories, a lot of times we're after the essence.
Art is truth over facts, kind of with what Alexander was saying. And you know, you're trying to tell a story, you're trying to evoke something from people. I'm sure there's a greater human, we communicate with stories. Stories are how we understand everything. And, you know, you can be mad about it, but you still have that experience. That is getting into the whole fake thing, or, you know, the Elmyr.
You know, as we go about finding our voice, we mimic what we have seen first. That's what Picasso did. That's what literally every artist you've ever seen, fine artist or otherwise, has done. They liked it.
Yeah, except for
Doug. It's a very difficult spot to get into, especially with art, where art is already getting into a subjective realm.
Because in the last theme, I talked about the responsibility of the artist to the truth. But the tributary to that is, which I think is extremely relevant to the modern era, is what is truth? Flipping through modern cable television, you will get 2 to 3 different truths that are in direct contradiction with one another. But that is hardly new. Now, I was raised as a Catholic, so I hope I don't offend anyone, but I think it's fair to say that most scientists will tell you that the universe was not created in 7 days by some deity, one of many examples in various theologies. However, zealots will swear by this narrative of creation as much as they will dismiss Darwinian evolution. To use one of Doug's words, that is their perception. That is their perceived truth. So therefore, it is their truth. And by continually blurring the lines in the world of art, I think the film poses a larger question of how much truth really matters. Or is there a universal truth? Now, obviously, there are facts, and we understand that, but people perceive them differently. It would be great if policy weren't determined by misconceptions and falsehood, but chasing ultimate bona fide truth might be a fool's errand given the very nature of humans. That's not to suggest that we can define any truth that we want. That would be chaos. But it has to be said that my truth is based on my perceptions that will always be fallible, but also undeniable to me. For example, if Alexander made a comment that he thought was innocuous that hurt my feelings, my truth becomes that it was a mean statement, regardless of his intentions. Furthermore, commonly held truths do shift. There was a time when it was generally accepted that the world was flat, planet Earth, or even more recently that you can get AIDS from kissing. Looking forward 50 years, there will likely be things that we take for granted now that have been thoroughly debunked. The point is that there will be millions of people that went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art less than a mile away from here and think that they saw an original Modigliani when really it was a de Hory forgery. Yet the impact was the same, and their truth will always be that they saw a Modigliani up close. And maybe that's okay. Somehow there's a peace in acknowledging the flexibility of truth instead of trying to insist our own perceptions of it. It's related, but slightly different, taking it outside of the art world a little bit. Alexander, what are your thoughts?
A lot.
Awesome.
We only really can be knowledgeable of our own experience, and even that's kind of hidden to us, you know.
We lie to ourselves. Our
We
truth
lie
is
to
sometimes
ourselves.
lies to ourselves.
I think anybody who's ever been in any kind of relationship knows that there is what happened, what I think happened, what they think happened, and then what the actual truth is sort of three sides of every, it's empathy that lets us get past that. I may not have meant anything by my offhanded remark. If you're offended by it, then there's repair work to be done at MoMA, wherever these places that have these forgeries in them. You can't deny somebody's experience of something. And I think that's really important. It doesn't necessarily mean that experience is all that matters. Does it feel real? Does it capture the essence of what it's supposed to be? I think we have a responsibility to try to tell the truth and to not outright lie, but what the actual truth is often up for interpretation.
Doug, what about this idea of truth, not just in art, but how truth becomes sort of flexible outside of art?
Man, who even knows? But with what he's saying about how you can't discount anybody's perception or experience, it also made me realize when you said that too, but you also can't force yours on anybody else.
Yeah.
Here's my experience, here's what I want to put out there, and just kind of feel how you want to, because I can't make you feel how I want you to feel. So all I can really do, people try all day long. That I think tends to be the best art, where you're not trying to force somebody on somebody because you can't. It's tough as a person, and like you're asking about in truth and real life, to just like let it go. You're like, I need you to think about me this way, and I need you to feel this way, so I feel this way. And we think we need to have all this control, where, in theory, real art and maybe real experience is just doing the thing, and then people are going to react how they react, and then you can have a conversation, you can have a dialogue.
And we talk about that on the show, and also in my classes all the time. I try to explain to the students and the viewers and the commenters specifically, once you finish a piece of art, whether it's fine art or a film or what have you, it no longer belongs to you, really. Yeah. It belongs to me.
Your reaction belongs to you.
Experience of it belongs to me. And there's nothing that you can say that can change that. people try to yell at me on the YouTube comments that I'm wrong about certain movies, but there is no right or wrong in this. That does not exist. A movie is not good or bad. You did not enjoy it, or you did enjoy it. That doesn't unequivocally, empirically make it good or bad. All right, guys, I better wrap things up. It's been a pleasure. I guess it's time for closing thoughts. We had a lot to say about this, weirdly frenetic, fascinating, complex, frustrating film. Doug, closing thoughts?
We talked longer than the film was, so at least pretty successful.
It felt like it anyway. Alexander, closing thoughts?
I just think that it's worth watching at least once to come away with your own thoughts about what exactly the point is, what he's trying to get at, what he's trying to do as a director, as an actor.
All right. Well, Orson Welles is obviously a big-time name in cinema, as is the great actor George C. Scott. Scott obviously starred in many films, but he also directed 2, the second of which is called The Savage is Loose from 1974, and that's the next film up for discussion on the No Name Cinema Society. Before that, however, these folks want to say goodbye using your
later
words. There you go.
Thank you. I'm saying
later.
Say goodbye. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this 87th meeting of the No Name Cinema Society